we're always going to need that fresh talent coming in to the business and growing with us so that we can mold them in a way that can serve our clients effectively. And we just thought it would be a great opportunity to actually do that, not only from a, like I talked about, a social mobility element to that, because we were quite passionate about the fact that actually tech can have quite a low barrier of entry in terms of young talent starting in the industry. We wanted to experiment with that and really see if we could put our money where our mouth was and find a program for talent to join that might not necessarily have gone to university, etc. Welcome to our next episode in the series of the Technology Boardroom. My name is Thea Fineren. I'm the Chief People Officer of the Advania UK Group, and I'm here today with Eden Pedley, who is Head of Resourcing in our Professional Services division. So we'll tell you a bit about our backstory and how we came about our positions in our business. But the main focus on today's series is to talk to you and share our experiences of our recent early talent program, which we kicked off in the UK in 2024. We've run previous talent programs in other markets, which we'll probably touch on as well. But this was our first time in the UK. It's been an interesting project to follow from my perspective, and we wanted to share some learnings from that and some stories in the hope that others can follow. So, Ian, do you want to kick off and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Eden, and as Thea said, I'm currently kind of head of resourcing in the professional services team. I have spent probably over a decade now in the world of resourcing and workforce strategy and what that looks like. Initially kind of kicking off my career at the Yorkshire Ambulance Service, believe it or not, in the public sector area, working out how many people you need to answer those calls on time. And then I moved into PwC, into the professional services, Big Four consulting world. I spent coming up to about 8 years there, always in resource management, always dealing with kind of early careers schemes, junior talent, graduate schemes coming in, and how we make sure we're kind of getting the best use out of our people from a utilisation and client perspective. Whilst being in resource management there, I think I kind of worked my way up the ranks, moved from accounting practices into tech practices, back into accounting practices, so kind of really learned the ropes over there. And then in July of 2023, so kind of just over a year ago now, I joined Advania to start the next chapter of my career.
Amazing. And one of the relevant parts of your story, I think, is how whilst you had this kind of amazing career journey in PwC and prior, one of your kind of big realizations was that things were pre-built there, right? So you're going into a big corporate environment that have perhaps done talent programs such as this for many years and had that opportunity to finesse them over the years. And so that, because I guess that was quite bittersweet. Do you want to talk to us? Because there'll be hopefully a lot of CEOs out there and talent people that might be thinking about starting a program like this. And they don't have all of that infrastructure that might have been built before. So do you just want to tell us a little bit about how that was different for you coming into Advania and, starting from a blank canvas and how you felt about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the move from PwC was somewhat nerve-wracking, because when you've been in an organisation of that size for so many years, to kind of step away from that anyway is a nervous thing to do. But one of the reasons that I wanted to join Advania was that I had spent all those years, like I said, learning that and honing that. But as you allude to, in an organisation of that size, the impact that you can have and the control that you can have over things such as the early talent scheme and the resourcing is somewhat very little, because it is a huge organisation that's already kind of got its ways of doing things, and creating something new or starting something new isn't particularly easy. Isn't particularly easy in an organisation of that size for red tape reasons, or just because the things are already done and established. So I definitely think with the transition of coming to Advania, I think on my part, the assumption that there was just a team that would do this, or there's a team that does that. And I was like,
Welcome
right,
to
okay,
startup scale up. Yeah. And it's not there, right? And that's why I think it's interesting. And it was a loaded question, because I think it's interesting. This probably is going to be speaking to, I don't imagine there's going to be many CEOs in those big corporates that need to learn about how to kind of drive talent programs, because it will be established. But yours is a really interesting journey you've just been on in the last year, right? Because you came into this thinking that it was going to be there, and you've had to go from ground zero and design something from afresh without anything there to go off. And I think, well, we think it's been an incredible story that one will share in this episode today. So just to give a bit of background to me, as I say, I'm Chief People Officer to the UK group. You've probably heard it already, because I don't think we're first in the series, but we are across 3 main markets. So we're in South Africa, UK, and the US. We have a growing number, about 1,200 employees as of today, and growing quite rapidly. And we're in about 6 or 7 offices throughout the UK at the moment. So we've had a talent program out in South Africa that we've been running for several years, of an internship program that we do with the Microsoft Student to Business program, and a company called Net Campus that help us skill them up. So we take about 10 to 20 graduates a year through that program. But really, this session today is about the UK and how to kind of build one up on UK grounds. So my background has been in talent for 27 years. I've been in big corporates. I've been in startups, scale-ups, you name it, every kind of industry. And what I wanted to do today was to kind of really hear from Eden, because she's very much taken the lead when it comes to this particular resourcing effort. We couldn't be happier with how it's going so far. So Eden, could you tell us, to start off with, maybe why the prospect? So we approached you about the job. The job from the start was clear that we wanted to build a talent program in the UK, and to drive that social mobility element to it. We also wanted to have a diversity play around that. And we also wanted to obviously future-proof our resourcing strategy around professional services. What was it about that attracted you? What made you join?
I think, as we kind of touched on briefly, I was ready for a kind of a new challenge. I think I'd kind of done and learned what I could learn there, and thought, let me see if I can kind of put everything I've learned into practice elsewhere. But then in my initial conversations with yourself, that kind of unapologetic approach towards kind of women in tech, social mobility, diversity really spoke to me, because I am of that background. So I think that kind of, we know what we need to do, and now we're working actively towards it. It was really attractive to me, that you were kind of wanting and vocal about progressing that as a company. I'm super passionate about early careers talent, about giving people a chance, giving people an opportunity, and it just felt like the right time to get involved, and that my kind of personal belief system, and kind of my belief towards the way opportunities should be given to people aligned exactly with Advania's. So kind of, why not join the company and kind of see what I can do, and see if I can help progress this initiative, move it forward.
And we were delighted to get you on board and get you started on it. But can you talk to us about? Well, I'll talk to you about a bit of the why this is important to us. I guess as a business, this is important to us for future talent proofing, fundamentally, as we kind of build our triangle that is our professional services division. We're always going to need that fresh talent coming in to the business and growing with us, so that we can mold them in a way that can serve our clients effectively. And we just thought it would be a great opportunity to actually do that, not only from a, like I talked about, a social mobility element to that, because we were quite passionate about the fact that actually tech can have quite a low barrier of entry in terms of young talent starting in the industry. We wanted to experiment with that and really see if we could put our money where our mouth was, and find a program for talent to join that might not necessarily have gone to university, etc. We also wanted to play our part in the kind of levelling up agenda, I think, in terms of getting some of those tech skills up in the north, up in Manchester. So Manchester specifically for us. So we wanted to kind of try as much as we could to get that program land up in the north. But also, as I mentioned before, diversity was a big element to this. So we will be trying at all lengths to diversify our workforce, and have greater representations female talent is always going to be something that we're going to be striving harder to kind of break the mold on. So I think at the time, we were 22% female talent in the business. We're now at 26%, not least from this kind of effort, lots of other efforts that we're putting into that. But that's a big kind of catalyst to our thinking. Actually, going at that entry point into talent is a fantastic way of accessing talent from other industries potentially. And if we're looking at from a skills hiring perspective, that will give us a great opportunity to do something different and make a difference to our professional services unit. So that's why we as a business were really passionate about it. We kind of looked long and hard about where we would land a talent program in our business and decided professional services was where we wanted to experiment. And you were part of that experiment in the kindest way. But yeah, so tell me, so you came on board, you kind of did a little bit of scoping exercises, you spoke to all the right people, all of this kind of stakeholders involved, and you kind of started to build your business case around this, Eden. So talk to us about what that looked like. What was the design? What did it look like in terms of targets, in terms of your diversity play, where you'd land them? Was there, I know that there was some slight kind of pivots where we were going to outsource it, where we're going to kind of insource it. Talk us through the whole business case.
Yes, so as you say, I kind of popped my consultant's hat back on. All those years of experience in that kind of world came helpful, and did a bit of kind of a review really of kind of what the current state was in professional services and where I thought this early years scheme could fit, and kind of came up with a bit of a paper based on my findings. So as we looked around across professional services, we knew that doing this for the first time meant that, you know, what we didn't want was a cohort of 30 people. We couldn't possibly take that on. So we said, right, let's keep it small and let's keep it to a number that we can really keep our arms around, that we have got the ability as a leadership team in professional services to really keep track of. And at the time we had 6 solutions in professional services. So it felt right to put kind of a technology associate, which is what we now call the role, into each solution so that we could watch what happened in each solution and if they would progress at the same rate, and if we could kind of get them to utilization and revenue at the same rate. So we landed on six people initially. We also, like you say, went for Manchester. So you can probably tell from my accent, I am a northerner. So if I can do anything to help my part with the levelling up agenda, I will. So when we decided to put them in Manchester, it was great news as well for the company that we kind of were starting this, this new scheme that we were making noise about, but we weren't going to put it in London. We were going to put it in one of our regional offices. And we also do a lot of work with the Greater Manchester Authority already, such as our workplace safaris. So it felt like a really natural fit to also then promote early years careers in that office. It felt like the right thing to do.
And sorry, if I can just stop you there, because I remember the naming. You passed over it. We call them technology associates, but there was actually quite a lot of thought around that, and we had quite a few conversations around it. And I think you landed with the right answer, but I think that would be quite interesting for people to hear because of why you came to that. And I think there was kind of junior associates, and there was kind of seniority came into a lot of the other titles. But could you talk us through a bit of the thinking around that and why you landed on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we knew that we needed to create a sense of belonging within that cohort, which is something that we can come on to, but which is incredibly important when you want to create a culture and make people feel like they're part of the fabric of a company. We needed them to have the same job title. And so even though they were going into Azure and into tech enablement and into all our different solutions, we knew we wanted them to have one title and one kind of job role, because we were going to bring them onto the scheme as one group of people. And so that led to the conversation around what can we call it. Now, naturally, within our 6 solutions, people have got associate consultant, junior engineer. So all these words then we had to have a big conversation about, because if we called them a junior associate, did that imply that they were more senior than someone else in TE, for example? Or did it imply that they were at the same grade as the junior consultant that we were hiring from market with 2 years of experience into our digital transformation team? So we landed on technology, broad brush, that's what they're all learning. And the word associate just felt more apt and more appropriate than junior. I think there's a lot of connotation that comes with language, isn't there? Yeah. So when we say something like junior, there's the assumption that they kind of are at the start of the career, or they don't have the authority, or they'd
always be looking at going to the next grade. When can I shed this skin of being a junior, right? So and that's why I kind of pinned down on that one, I think, because it is important, that naming right from the off of the cohort and their job titles will be very important as you go to market and when you kind of go to that talent outreach, but also once they're in, because it kind of does drive a certain behavior, I think. And you do need to look at your incumbent naming, as you did do, but also around that future of how can you grow from that place. And I guess you'd start to specialize as they kind of go up the ladder in their technology specialisms.
Absolutely. So it allowed us that kind of, I suppose, a one size fits all name, but that also felt right and just for the program, not to refer to them as junior anything, but to call them a technology associate, because that's absolutely what they are. And that when they come to the end of the program, they'll be able to kind of move off into a skill specific role title within their own team.
Perfect. Sorry, I interrupt your flow on that one, but do go ahead with the rest of the business case.
Yeah. Then we looked at our kind of our diversity, particularly our gender balance. What did we want to achieve? It, as you said, we were kind of at 22% and we're now at 26%, which is a fantastic story. But we know that early years can have a huge part in that. Because it allows us to attract more females into the program, because we went on a skills-based application and entry requirement as well. Allowing us to be skills-based and to not mandate a degree in computer science per se really did open the door to then driving that female percentage that we wanted to set ourselves really high. Now, we made no apologies with that. We said we wanted a 70% female cohort. We went really, really high, which is, it was incredibly hard to get to. We didn't quite get there. I think we landed somewhere between 50 and 60, but for me, that's still a huge success. And I think that if you hit your target easily, it probably wasn't high enough anyway. So I'm glad we went lofty with that, and we've got something to
aim for the moon.
Yeah, something to aim at next year. But to allow us to get to that female and that diversity balance, we did do the skills-based approach. And I think even if you look at like the stats that UCAS released this year, I think it's something like there was about 15,500 people accepted into computing degrees, according to UCAS this year. And under 3,000 of them are women. So we're not even at 20% going into.
So that was important, not just from a social mobility play in terms of actually there's some great skills out there that don't necessarily go to follow the academic route, but also from a gender perspective, because actually if we were waiting for them to finish their university degree, then they were less likely to have the right, we were less likely to have the right diversity in terms of output to that. So again, creating a different pathway of entry was twofold in that sense. So just to go over what skills-based hiring means, if kind of people don't know, is that you're not kind of looking for certifications specifically on certain things or academics in certain ways. You're looking for the skills, the passion. So yeah, I guess it's the counter to the academic hiring, which obviously early talent programs have historically always tended towards as a kind of a safety net. So, but what did that look like? What did we look for? Because I know that we were quite specific. We did want to have some kind of acid testing, like show us that you're interested in tech, right? So we thought hard about that. So how did we sort the wheat from the chaff in terms of their interest levels and their passions?
Yeah, so what we said was that we want you to write a kind of a cover letter, or kind of write a one pager on why you're interested in tech, what you've done to develop that interest in your own time outside of whatever job that it is you do now, and why you're the right fit for the technology associate role. Here's the role, tell us why you're good for it. And we were kind of like intentionally didn't put a word count around it, because we wanted to just let people write their own. If you wrote me 3 sentences versus people that wrote 2 pages, there's a measure then on kind of commitment and want and desire to get the job role. So we asked for that cover letter because we weren't asking for a degree, as we say, but we wanted to be able to also test someone's kind of willingness and eagerness to display they wanted the role, but also kind of that writing ability. If we think about the fact that they're consultants,
and if they've got 5 pages, you'd probably also think twice as well. So succinct.
So there was good. Kind of an acid test there on, can they write a good, solid, succinct piece on why they should get the role? Can they write a pitch? We did that, and kind of we assessed from there and we screened from that point.
Yeah, so we'll go back to that on the selection process, because that was I was involved in that, and that was good fun, wasn't it? So and actually that was really good fun from a business perspective, from a broader business perspective. So we should talk to the impact that has on the buzz in the offices and the leaders that were involved in the program when we talk about how we did the selection process. But going back to the kind of defining the program itself, the business case was drawn up. So you're kind of looking to land it in Manchester. You're going to have do a skills-based approach. You were looking for initially for 6, was it? Or 6?
Yeah, initially 6.
Yeah.
Hires into Manchester, yeah.
Yeah, and you built a cost model in terms of that return on investment. So this is professional services. These are consultants. So these are kind of billable resources. Talk us through a bit about that cost model and how that kind of layered up. What does that look like?
Yeah, so the cost model was an interesting challenge because obviously we've not had resourcing this way, kind of early careers resourcing to professional services before. So how quickly they were going to get to utilisation, how quickly they were going to get to a point where they could be billable to client was, I would say, more art than science at this point as we were working it through. But we kind of worked to figure out, we will go through the first 3 months on kind of an assumption that there'll be no utilisation, it will be upskilling, and then we'll do a slow ramp from there. And we'll take what we charge out our kind of junior associate rate at as a base rate across them all, looking at what do we sell into at the public sector in the minute, what do we sell into on average in the commercial world. Let's think about a sensible charge out rate for them and let's model them from there. Now, that did actually shoot us off down kind of a different route and when we looked at kind of a different option, because what we realised is that taking everyone in internally and taking everybody onto our own payroll meant that the ramp to revenue was quite slow, and that kind of build up was quite slow to seeing any return on investment. So at that point we did think about another option in looking at a hire train deploy provider. So they are kind of companies that will hire and recruit graduates for you, train them, and then you kind of hire them from them with the skill set that you want so that they're ready to go to clients. You don't do any of the front end lifting yourself. And we actually ended up getting into conversation with a company called 1010, and they run the 1010 Academy. And what they do is they train up, as I said, graduates into all different areas of the tech spectrum so that they're ready to deploy for their customers, being us. And the reason that we did that was that from looking at the cost model, we realised we needed a somewhat of a quicker return on investment.
So you basically did, I remember we looking at this together, you basically did an A/B test in your cost model, didn't you? You did if we did this internally, where we looked at training these people up with our L&D departments, that kind of those person hours of that training, and obviously the cost of the payroll costs for the initial 3 months of absolutely no expected utilization, and then it ramped up to, was it 10%, 15%, up to full utilization over 12 months or something like that. So we had one model that was internally based with all of those kind of costs baked in there, and then you ran a kind of a parallel model, cost modeling, didn't you, of using an external provider,
Yeah.
which is much higher cost from the off, but the concept is they come ready baked, right? So do you want to talk us through the concept a little bit more?
Yes, the concept is that you kind of go to one of these external providers, in our instance being 1010, and you say, I would like five associates, and I would like them to be in Azure DevOps. And what they'll do at that point is they will put them through an internal academy. It's called the 1010 Academy in this case. And they will train them into that kind of junior DevOps resource that you want. But what they also do is they do the kind of what you would traditionally call the soft skill training. So the personal brand, the time management, the stakeholder management, the general kind of behavior in a professional workplace. So what they're basically saying, in essence, is by the time that kind of they land with you, they are a ready-made junior resource with the skill set that you require, that you can sell straight to market. So whilst it's much more costly than kind of bringing someone in onto your payroll, you do get a much quicker return on investment because these resources are ready to go to client.
I mean, at the time, you'd still had that nervousness around whether we would land, that we had some kind of pipeline that we thought we could at the time, but that's always kind of moving around, right? But and interesting, you could still kind of put in, you would work with that company to say, we're looking for, a diversity play, so kind of port all our kind of aspirations on how we want this program to run. They would take that forward for you as well. So how did you land when you looked at these two cost models side by side? Where did we take it to?
We looked at them both individually, so complete outsource, complete insource, and went, well, neither are quite right there, because the complete outsource, where then it's a high cost base. We're not learning anything. We won't have grown any internal scheme ourselves. Completely internal, the return on investment is quite slow. So why don't we kind of merge them together, create a hybrid, and run a stream A and stream B all in one cohort? And that's where we landed, because by taking a small amount of people from 1010 and instantly being able to kind of best guess working through what our pipeline looks like and where we could get them to client quickly and get a return on investment quickly. It meant that the program was turning a profit and creating a return on investment as soon as they kind of landed with us to subsidize that slower ramp to utilization from the internal people. And that's kind of ultimately where we landed.
So you had kind of two cost models that you merged together, one with a slow ramp up, but kind of a little bit more control internally, and one where you'd put, I think it was 4 headcounts. 4 in total through 1010, where we knew we would get much lesser margins. There's a 2-year commitment to it, right? And then they can come on board with you afterwards, but you're going to make very little margin in those 2 years, and then have the opportunity, hopefully, for them to kind of grow with you in the future. But you still have the opportunity to interview these folks, right, when you're using a third party. So, and we'll go back as to whether that's been effective or not. But I want to take you back to also the selection process. So we set our stall out in terms of what kind of success looked like from a cost model perspective. We looked at some diversity targets that we were aiming to achieve through this, where they were going to be. We also modeled out the program itself, right, the 3 months orientation program and what that looked like. And that was, we'll go on to a bit more detail around that. But once we had the model, the design, I guess, we took it to market. Talk us through how we actually recruited. How did we, I guess, focusing on the internal program right now, how did we get the message out there? How did we recruit? How did that go? And then how did we do the selection process?
Yeah, so we actually, one of the challenges that we had right off the bat is that we weren't in sync with the traditional education system in the UK. So we weren't going, for the usual September start. Our applications weren't out at Easter across summer. We were looking to start in May. So it wasn't that traditional academic year. So that was challenge A. Will there be anyone available for an early years scheme at this time of year? Which definitely kept me awake at night. So when it came to recruitment, we didn't have the ability to go to any fairs or kind of speak to any kind of universities or anything like that because we were out of that.
Yeah.
So we went very old school. We advertised the job on the website, we put it on LinkedIn, we put it on Indeed, and we crossed our fingers. And I refreshed the application probably every 30 minutes in the hope that people were applying.
And they did, right?
Much to our delight, we actually had loads of applications, which was fantastic. Yeah. And one of the other challenges we had set ourselves is we had already picked an assessment date and we'd already picked a start date. So that meant any candidates needed to be able to.
And we communicated that. And that was important, though, to give kind of commitment to the marketplace, isn't it? Because there's a lot of jobs out there that, these poor kind of early talent folks, candidates, they're hitting out kind of 40 CVs a day and hearing nothing back. So I think it was important to us to show our commitment to the program right from the off and put dates in the calendar. You must be able to kind of make these dates, right? And I think you should also reflect on the kind of caliber of the job spec itself. That don't ever underestimate the importance of a compelling, certainly at this kind of early talent stage, of a compelling job description and making sure it's inclusive, that it's kind of gender agnostic, etc. And so it gets that reach is fantastic. But how many applicants did we get in total for the 6 jobs in the UK? It's about 150 or something?
It was about 150, and it was only open for something like, I could be wrong, I'll be misquoting here, but it was open for about 10 working days.
And we were blown away by the talent, or what's your view on that?
Really blown away by the talent, to the point of kind of shortlisting was a challenge. Because we knew we were having one assessment day, which meant we had a capacity limit. We could only really invite 14 people in. So we couldn't just have everyone.
How did you sift through that?
So some of that was, can you start in May? Can you start? Certain people were like, I've got a 3-month notice. And unfortunately, in that instance, it just didn't work for us because we had to commit to a start date at the same time to have them all in. So some of them was that. And then we went to a scoring system with the team leads, with the heads of department in professional services. I was popping CVs over into kind of a working sheet, and they would run through and they would mark it with a 1 if they definitely wanted to interview that person. They would mark it with a 2 if they'd be interested for a conversation. And we went on a scoring basis on how highly they scored, because one of the challenges that we did have with recruiting is that we were going to put these technology associates into 6 different solutions. Now, what those solutions are looking for is entirely different. You are looking for something completely different in digital transformation to what you're looking for in development. they're different skill sets, they're different even characteristics of the people. So we needed to make sure that of the 14 people we're bringing in, it was broad spectrum enough to have the right fit for all our solutions.
Yeah. And that's super challenging, right? Because we've already said, we set our stall out saying we're not looking for fully fledged kind of coders to go to the dev team, right? This is us putting our necks on the line, saying actually we're ready to train folks. We're ready to give people an opportunity that is different from that academic opportunity. And that means kind of training people from ground zero. So what you're looking for isn't necessarily like coding skills, right? So to find potential, like you say, that CV, that cover letter, and how they write their CV, how they put their passion, how passionate they come across in that CV and cover letter is really important, actually. So we've somehow found a way to kind of sift through the CVs and get to a number of people to invite. And I remember having a conversation with Eden saying, and I've obviously been, I've had too many scars over the years, I think, and become too bitter. But I remember saying, look, over recruit for the assessment day, over recruit, you'll have loads of dropouts on the day. People can be flaky, etc., kind of overfill the seats. And yet, lo and behold, I think we had 12 kind of places on the assessment day. Is that right? Keep me honest on this. Yeah. And all 12 turned up. So what do I know?
We actually had 12 places that we'd prepared for. We invited 14 on the assumption 2 would drop out, and all 14 were there.
Yes. Yeah.
We were on our heels very quickly to make sure that we could accommodate all 14 through the process.
Obviously, the assessment day, again, you're starting from candidates that don't have ready-made skills. Like, so you're not assessing based on their particular skill set. You're assessing based on potential, willingness, how they come across, their ability to problem solve, etc. So how did you design the assessment day? What components did it have? How did you kind of eke out those kind of potential talents where obviously they're not obvious and apparent on the face of a CV?
So we went with kind of an attitude and aptitude based process. And also then on some core attributes that we decided that they were the right fit for the technology associate. And we split our day into 2 halves. So it was a 2-part.
I'm sorry, just to interject. How did you get to that point? That wasn't just you, Eden, deciding that. How did you get to those common attributes for PS?
To those common attributes. So I worked through it with the heads of department based on, in order to be a good professional services consultant, what do we think we need to have? Do we need to have the ability to lead self?
Yes, I think that's important. That's why I was kind of, it's really important to bring those kind of ultimate stakeholders in. These are the guys and people that are going to be housing this talent when it lands. So they've got to be brought into every step of the way, right? So it was really important to get them around a table and to get some commonality, I guess, in terms of what you're looking for.
And we, attributes such as problem solving, we're going to need them to problem solve. You don't need to have had a degree in it or a relevant degree, but is there something that they can demonstrate, something they've done prior that lends them to, oh, actually, great, this person would be great at problem solving. So we kind of worked through what we thought on an attributes level was the right thing to come from, and we kind of agreed on 6, I think it was, in total. But I did do everything in consultation with the heads of department in the professional services team, because this was the first of its kind in that team, and not all of them have got a background where they've seen this happen before. It was definitely a hearts and minds journey, and bringing them with me to make sure that they had full buy-in as well, because ultimately these technology associates were going to go into their team, and it was going to be a requirement of them and their team to train these people to get them to be that kind of fully fledged consultant. So it was a very collaborative process on kind of how we got there and how I kind of got the buy-in from those heads of department, to the point of I needed them all to come to Manchester for the entire day for the assessment centre. I really needed them to invest in this process with me. And
the day was split into 2 halves, right? So you split your cohort of 12/14 into 2, and talk us through how you did that.
Yeah, so one part of the day was the group assessment. Now, the group assessment was kind of a role play scenario in which yourself, Thea, and Pat played a client. We wanted to role play a real life scenario to see how people and to see how our candidates performed in that situation. So the idea was, as a group of 7, they went into a client meeting where you set out the client problem, and we wanted to see at that point, were they observing, were they listening, were they taking down what the client was saying, were they really understanding what that client problem was. They then went away from the client meeting and they had 20 minutes to work through what they thought that problem meant as a group, but to devise a question per person to ask back to kind of get more out of the client, that next step that you would do with the client, that fact find in order to land on a solution for them. and to ask those questions back to the clients. They came back into another role play meeting and they asked those questions. And we did specifically kind of mandate that they needed to ask one each, because we just wanted to see how they would kind of engage and how they would ask that question, if they would come with any follow-up, if they will kind of use their instinct to get any more information in that moment, how comfortable they were speaking in a public setting. After that, they went away and they had, I think it was about an hour to devise a solution, considering technology and considering the Microsoft stack as well, because that's obviously important to us at Advania, on what they will put back to the client. And then they came back in a group and they presented back to that client. But whilst all that process was happening, myself and a member of the HR team, we were assessing behaviours. Were we allowing other people to speak? Was one person quite clearly going off down a pathway and making everyone else come with them? Who was really contributing? Who was sitting back? Who was like active listening as opposed to just listening to speak? And we watched all those behaviours that actually are really, really important when you are in a professional services team, because you need to be listening, you need to be collaborative, you need to be mindful of other team members. And we kind of scored based on those.
We had a scorecard. You had a pre-written scorecard that you were going to be.
We had a pre-written scorecard in which we were watching those behaviours.
And and just before you go into the interview, what I was just going to say is that there might be people watching today that aren't in technology businesses, but actually the principle of doing that selection process, I would say, is the same. So you've got to try and emulate a real life scenario, right? So our real life scenarios for our consultants is they'll be going in to meet with a client and they'll be asking a client what their business problem is, and they'll be hacking through to a solution at some stage, right? So I've been in environments before where they might be customer service reps and they have to get on the phone and they have to see how many phone calls they need to make and how quickly they can answer and resolve a ticket and the net promoter score, etc. So you've got to try and the assessment day needs to look like emulate as much as possible what the reality of the job could be, or at least the skills required to perform the job effectively. So it can be done in a different way. If it's customer service, it could be, I don't know, having a teppanyaki desk and a table and having people serve people and being able to react to their emotions. But the point as to us, that was trying to emulate as much as possible as a real life scenario, and we found it really quite useful, didn't we? Because the behaviors that started to display, we could have personality profiled all of them within just that kind of 1 hour session because of the way that they kind of came across in that environment. So were there any kind of places where you had to intervene?
Yeah, they were interesting, and there were. Yeah, there was the odd occasion where we saw those really dominant character traits coming out in some people, and that might have been walking them down a completely wrong path, but the team were just unable to pull that back. So there were moments that we did have to kind of step in and say, I'm just going to kind of regroup you and kind of refocus you and point you back down a different path. But again, that's exactly why you do it, right? Because that's so valuable in that moment, because what we've witnessed there is something that we wouldn't necessarily isn't the right cultural fit for who we are and for who this program is. If you've got a candidate that's kind of so unwilling to listen to another 6 people and is walking down a wrong path, are they A, going to listen to someone who's training them, B, listen to a client? So that's why those real life scenarios are so valuable, particularly in a skills-based role.
But it's also really interesting to show kind of level of self-awareness. So when you do kind of point them to the fact that this is happening, you can then get the opportunity to also check into their agility, so how nimble they are, to how great they are at taking feedback, which is incredibly important in any job anywhere in the world as a success factor. But also the level of self-awareness and how they can adapt to a different situation given that feedback. So I think we had some quite positive ones. I think the few conversations were had out of necessity. I think there was some really nice, some candidates that came through that did respond well and others that didn't. But again, that helped sort out the wheat from the chaff, didn't it? So it's another part of the exercise that was a really useful intervention and a curveball to throw in there to see how they respond to it. And how did you structure the interview scenario? So you swapped it around. So you had 2 cohorts within the 14. So they did either the morning or the afternoon, and the other side of the day was spent in an interviewing round robin type scenario, right?
It was spent in a round robin, like MMI, multiple mini interviews, where each head of department, so all 6 were in a different room, and each candidate rotated from one room to another in 20-minute short burst interviews. those heads of department were also all working off a scorecard, and were all scoring, and they'd all written a question each, kind of a technical question that was relevant to their solution, and were working through that with the candidates. Now, 20 minutes is an incredibly short amount of time, especially when you're then seeing multiple people throughout the day. But I think what the feedback that we did get from the heads of department was that it was enough in that instance, because when we're looking for someone that is that entry level and that is kind of, we're not asking to
Can't ask them for much. No, can't.
We don't want, tell me what you did in your last role. A lot of them haven't necessarily had a last role. It was enough to kind of get the sense of, is this an area that they're super interested in? Are they asking the right questions? Are they engaging? Are they kind of asking me questions?
They're picking up on emotional cues at that stage.
Yeah. What do they already know? Because some of them, whilst they hadn't had a job, and whilst they hadn't necessarily done a degree in that area, did have a real passion for Azure, say, or for development, and had done things in their own time, like we're a member of Girls Who Code and things like that. So were then able to speak more in those interviews and almost play their card into that solution that they wanted. So we do feel that the 20-minute gave us the insight that we needed, combined with that kind of real life scenario play to make a good decision at the end of that.
And we had kind of weighted scorecards as well, right? So it all kind of rolled up into, and it was all very objective in the end, but it seemed to work. That worked really well, didn't it? I think, in terms of that weighting of the scorecard. And the other, sorry, go on.
No, and I think it worked really well, but I also think it was, like we've said previously, it was a real experiment, because I think I'm right in saying that none of the heads of department have been involved in that kind of assessment day before. So not only was it kind of new for us, Advania, it was new for them. I was kind of, the candidates were nervous, so were the heads of department, because
didn't know what to expect. I think the one learning that I took away from that is that they did say, they said that they spent quite a lot of time in their 20 minutes just talking about their functions and stuff, and actually we could have upfronted that and had videos made and sent them in advance for those that we're going to invite. So that's definitely one kind of takeaway. But so we should have probably said that we did a session before the session to introduce them to the company, and I was there, and our can't remember who else was there, but our CEO, I can't remember, but to kind of warm them up to it. And then we did a kind of a briefing session at the end of it, and let them know what's going to happen next, and had lunch, etc. So it wasn't all just hard drills that we had them put through. Then we kind of set them free to go on their way, and with our kind of our handy scorecards, and you pulled everyone into a room and talk us through what you did there.
Yeah. So we got everyone in the boardroom after and said, kind of, what I'm going to give you now is a golden ticket, so to speak. It did come with chocolate, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory also. And at that moment, each head of department had the opportunity. We kind of did a debrief, and it was, I think, such a nice moment for me to hear how much they'd enjoyed it. And I do think that by the end of the day, they were even more bought into the next phase of the program, and even more excited for have it to start because of how it had gone, and also kind of the how pleased they were at the quality of the talent that we'd seen. Because once we did invite 14 people in and all 14 turned up, we didn't know how they were going to perform at that assessment day.
And these are leaders that hire constantly, right? They hire experienced hires constantly. These are experienced leaders that run departments of between 10 and 40 people. And so they've hired a fair number of people before, but they were really delighted by the caliber. So we went round the room and we kind of called out each name, get a bit of a debrief, and we allowed them to play it's like the golden buzzer in X Factor or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, so they were allowed to play their golden ticket for a particular candidate in that moment.
It was very exciting. There was fist punches in the air. There was all sorts going on.
Some of them did play their golden ticket. Some of them didn't. We saw, insights into their personalities in that moment as well.
I didn't know no one had played their ticket at all.
No, some people reserved it. Some people reserved that ticket because they wanted to kind of go away and do that piece of it, like they wanted to reflect overnight, which was quite interesting, but they did. And then we kind of moved forward with who we were going to offer roles to. But that then opened another can of worms, in that we said we wanted 6, but we couldn't get down to 6 because the quality of the candidate had been so good. And some of our heads of department at that point took a leap of faith and said, I'll take 2. If you'll let me, if we can make this business case work, if we can have 2, we will. And we actually went from 6 to 8. So we made 8 offers in the end, which was, again, testimony to the quality of the candidate that had come through that door on the day. Because, there were moments where I thought, what if we only get 4? But it was actually, it was the other end of the spectrum, in that we had to kind of we couldn't get it down and ended up offering more than we'd initially intended to.
That's fantastic. And I know one of the other things that we were hot on was the delivery of those messages. Again, my experience on the talent side is you've got to keep momentum really, really tight in any hiring nowadays, especially in a tech company, but not least at this kind of talent. Some of them weren't even in jobs. So you've got to move fast, right? And there's an expectation. And we'd made commitment, I think, to get to them by the end of the week. And it was Wednesday when we did it. So we delivered the news. And again, there's probably kind of negative Nelly here saying that not all of them would accept it. But what was the result? What was the acceptance rate?
I think of the 8, I'm reaching back in my memory here now, but we only one person, one or maybe two, didn't accept, but for various other reasons. I wouldn't say it was the program, more like had realised the commute was maybe too far, that kind of thing initially. But then we did get 8 full acceptances and 8 people started.
So we had a few on backup plan, right?
We did, yeah.
Yeah. So 8, and then 8 started, right, as well. Meanwhile, what was happening with this other 10-10 program?
So what was happening with the 10-10 program is that we'd worked internally along with the commercial team and analysing our pipeline to understand where we thought our biggest kind of opportunity to cash was with that junior resource when we brought them on. And by doing that, we'd landed on the fact that we wanted people in the Azure DevOps space. So I was working with the head of Azure, Wes, to interview candidates through 10-10. And like you say, we'd made them aware of our diversity play and we wanted to see kind of a good gender balance, and we did that. We interviewed those guys as well. I think we interviewed about 6 people and we made 4 offers. Now, because we'd started this process with a relatively long lead time to when they wanted them to start, what we had the ability to do was bespoke a training plan. So after we'd picked the 4 people from 10-10 that we wanted, we then had 10-10 bespoke an Azure DevOps pathway for us to give them some extra learning so that when they landed with us, with the rest of the cohort, they'd already had some extra upskilling to make that go to market that bit faster. And so that was moving in the background. One of the considerations that we did have around that 10-10 was that whilst we were doing stream A and stream B, so to speak, what we absolutely wanted to do was create an entire sense of kind of one cohort, and we didn't want them to feel like 10-10 and like Advania, because that wasn't the view that we were taking on with that. So there was only a week's difference, I believe, in their start date in the end, and we onboarded them all as a cohort, and treat them as kind of as one program, and not as separate streams within the business. But that was moving in train, and we got those in as well.
Fantastic. So that's 12 in total. 12 started.
We started with 6.
Yeah, a bit more than our commitment originally set out to be, but hey ho, everyone got quite. And actually, just before we go into the program itself, the orientation program, and then the kind of the rest of the 2-year program as it was set out to be, I think we should talk about and reflect on the kind of the greater impact it had to the Manchester business and probably the wider business as well, in terms of not just, it was a real feel-good factor, right, for the business, and felt mostly by the folks up in Manchester, seeing it all kind of come to life, seeing all of these candidates kind of literally running from room to room, and the role play kind of playing out in the kind of open office, etc. There was an incredible buzz that it created, but it's also from a kind of an EVP, kind of an internal EVP, employee value proposition. It had a really significant impact to that feel-good factor, I think, more broadly across all of our employee base, because I guess you leveraged the comms, you kind of made a point of letting people know, and talk us through the kind of comms plan and how that indirectly really kind of lifted some spirits around the rest of the employee base.
We were really kind of loud and proud about it, internal comms wise. We announced it was coming. We also announced that applications were open internally, and actually probably a good thing to touch on here is that we did get an internal applicant who did become successful on the program. So we had a live example of career mobility by starting this program internally. But we kind of kept the business in lockstep with us every step of the way. After the assessment day, we posted
Made me
pictures.
slightly nervous because I'm negative Nelly again, but yeah.
Yeah, and we were
shouting up, it's going to be really embarrassing.
Yeah, when we were shouting from the rooftops, right, there was a real kind of feet to the fire moment on, we've been so loud about this is going to have to work, which was nerve-wracking for me, because I felt like it had my name on the tin as well. But we kept it going. We were loud about it. It did work. After the assessment day, we posted pictures. We did some comms on LinkedIn. We announced their first day in. We were just really loud and really proud about it, because what we were doing was the right thing to do. And the response from the business was fantastic. The response that we were bringing in early years talent, when people found out that it was skills based and we'd not done kind of a degree requirement, honestly, the response from the business was amazing. So much so that I had other heads of department from outside professional services coming to me and being like, can I get someone on that? Can I get someone on that? And they're still doing it now for year 2. So I think it was incredibly.
And I think that can't be laboured hard enough, the impacts. I mean, you look at these things from a direct impact, I don't know, to the bottom line or whatever, or to society, but actually the impact to the kind of the greater employee base is, can't be ignored. It had a really good, feel good factor to it, and that lives on now, right? So our folks started, obviously before that we'd planned out their 3 months. So we'll probably focus now just on the internal cohort, because the 10-10 ready baked, they come skilled up. And it's been a great relationship with them, actually. They've not asked us to say this, but I think we've had a really good experience, and they've been really nimble and been able to work with us to design exactly what that looks like, so that we could land them in billable roles straight away from the off. So that's been a great experience. But from an internal learnings, obviously we worked, or you worked really hard with the L&D department. Put a shout out to JP there, Justin, in our L&D department out in South Africa, and to design first, we've not done this, right? We've not built the skills internally. We do a lot of upskilling people, a lot of Microsoft certs, left, right, and centre, and we make sure our people always get skilled up. Thought my microphone had gone off then, but we've never actually started from ground up, right? So we weren't sure we could do it, right? That was part of the feasibility stage, I guess, is working out whether we could actually skill someone up through everything that we've got, and what would it take in terms of using our internal resources to skill them up, or do we need to bring external partners in, or what would get them up to a capability where we'd be able to kind of sell them out to clients? Could we actually do that? And what does it look like in terms of resource and cost? So you spent a lot of time modelling that out with JP, and it's a 3-month program. Talk us through what that looked like.
I can take very little credit for the L&D pathway, because, as you said, shout out to JP. He put in so much effort for us there. But kind of what we did was we looked at everything that we had at our disposal. I say we again, JP looked at everything we had at our disposal. Our relationship with the ESI classrooms, our LinkedIn Learn, what other pathways we've got internally already that work. And we laid all that out, and we sent all that to our heads of department. And in consultation with each head of department, we worked out what they thought good would look like for them per solution, and what pathway they felt would get their kind of early years person to where they needed to be. We focused heavily on the first 4 to 6 weeks in particular, on them all doing the same thing, living the Advania way, the way we use things.
Microsoft general skills, wasn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
General skills, Microsoft general skills, to make sure that they were all doing the same pathway at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And to baseline them, yeah, exactly that. And to make sure that also create that sense of cohort again, that they were all on the same learning journey, taking the same classrooms and doing the same pathway. We also then looked at bringing in an external provider to do that kind of human skills, softer skills training around, again, time management, conflict resolution, personal brand, how to handle yourself in a room with a client, because you can't underestimate the importance of those skills, particularly as a consultant in professional services. It's not just the tech skills that they're going to need to be successful. And JP kind of spoke to numerous external providers for us and landed with QA. And we had this really fantastic 6 days over 2 weeks where their trainers came in and kind of walked our new cohort through what good looked like from those behaviours.
Yeah, we could pick from a list. I did the kind of work with JP. You could pick from a list of actual skills and capabilities you'd look to build out, which was really quite cool. So you could kind of build your 6 days of learning pathway. And I think there was something else around. I think so a lot of the training was on demand, right, for this talent program. And we did something else that was unique. We had them come into the office from Tuesday till Thursday, right? And then Monday and Friday was generally their learning days, where they'd go on this on-demand platform, and we'd be tracking to see whether they're kind of keeping up with things and how they're getting on. But we kind of felt that it needed a bit of mixing up a bit as well, didn't we? That they needed to know that we kind of really invested in them, that we're not just expecting them to sit there on their computers and self-learn. It needed a bit of injection, I think, of classroom training and a bit more kind of fun around it. So that was important.
And what's come out of it actually is a really nice, I would say, healthy competition amongst them as a cohort, in that they are always super keen to see who can get first past the post with the training, who can get the first Microsoft cert, who can kind of get further down their pathway. And I think some of that is to do with the fact that we did say we wanted them in Tuesday to Thursday, so that they were sat at the side of each other. They did create that sense of team and were kind of pushing each other to work through that training platform that we did, and that training pathway that JP had kind of bespoke for each of them internally.
So just again, we did the kind of 2 weeks is our generic onboarding into Advania. And then there was a further kind of 4 weeks on Microsoft generalist upskilling and certs, etc. And then this kind of the QA piece in the middle of the 6 days. And then all along, they have a buddy system, right? So you've got a buddy and a mentor that we also paired them up with in their specific specialisms. And then the last 4 weeks was kind of deep specialism, or 4 to 6 weeks, wasn't it? I think a deep specialist training in their particular areas. So that was how it kind of played out. It got more and more specific as the 3-month program went on. And then we rolled them off into the business at that stage, right?
Into the business and into any specific pathways or certs that the heads of department and that technical team have asked for them to do to kind of continue their learning. So they're now off and into their own kind of bespoke, specific to solution pathway.
They're doing a crazy job on their certs, right? We were looking at them the other day and there was like 15, 16 certs they'd already got, and that was a month ago. So
it was 5 months we were up at 15, 16 Microsoft certs.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. They've really got the hunger. So I guess we need to talk about, so they're working, the business we brought them down to London as part of, we should say, as part of the orientation program, where they got to meet with the kind of the headquarters, how that works. They got taken out on the night out. All of this stuff I would say is really, really important to particularly this kind of early talent type of a cohort. We've also had introduction sessions with all of the exec teams. So myself and my kind of 8 peers had a kind of an hour session with them where they got to ask questions, and we timed that. I think it was kind of 3 months in, or no, probably about 4 or 5 months in, purposely, so that they had chance to kind of understand the lay of the land and had kind of relevant questions to ask. And they've just been really active, haven't they? They've been really putting their hands up to get involved in projects. They've been designing. One of the chaps designed an app so that we had no wastage on our pizza order delivery in Manchester.
Right.
They've just been, and because of that, they've really been kind of above the parapet in the business. People are noticing them. I think they've really got some confidence behind them, I think, which is fantastic to see. How's the so as we kind of look to wrap up and look at what would be the things you would do differently then, Eden, on if doing a lessons learned exercise? Anything? We've talked about it a few times. There's a few things that we've said, if we had the time again, or when we do this next year, we will flex it by doing X. What would they be?
We would probably align to the academic year would be one of the learnings next year, just to give ourselves kind of more time, more run up, and kind of to fall in sync when we're looking at that kind of young talent coming into the workplace. Mm-hmm. We would probably, I would like to align to that. I think one of the other learnings that we definitely take is that we know we put them in in all different solutions, but what we did do was keep the kind of time to revenue utilization profile the same. And what we've learned quite quickly is that dependent on solution and the skills they're having to learn, it absolutely needs to vary, because they're just not going to upskill at the same time. So I think we would need to kind of reflect.
Would you put any of those skills back to 10-10 instead of us, like the cyber ones, for example? Would you outsource some rather than others?
Yeah, and I think you would. I think that certain kind of solutions, cyber, dev, that kind of thing.
The harder to skill up ones, you might outsource that.
Harder to skill up, so you would potentially outsource that one next time.
Would you? Would you? What's your thinking in terms of the A/B test that we did? Was the outsource and internal, because we needed to learn, right? We needed to learn whether we could pull it off internally, whether they'd stayed around, all of these factors, our success metrics would be considered looking at those 2 different parallel paths. But what's your gut telling you now? Would you do the same again? Would you kind of hedge bet again, or would you try and bring it all in-house?
I don't think I would hedge bet again. I don't think I would at this moment in time, because I think that the learnings that we've taken from this round would be enough to make sure the in-house would be successful. And I think one of the challenges of the A/B test and of using 1010 is, I know we touched on, we went with Azure DevOps, but in the meantime, there was a significant tail off in our pipeline, and that meant that we had an overhead and not as much work as we wanted.
Yeah.
So we did have to pivot quite quickly, and that is one of the challenges that comes in, because there is there is a day rate to pay for people from 1010.
And that's on us, right? If we can't deploy them, we're still paying the day rate, and it's significant. And they've got to pay, and it's significant, but it's fair because they have to pay off their costs. So I'm just trying to stop this call coming in. They have to pay off their costs, and so it all kind of equates over the 2-year program. But yeah, no, I think that's great to hear. But you'd put more kind of more focus, more leverage, or a slower ramp up on those harder to skill up technology areas. You just give yourself a little bit more breathing space and maybe get some more external support in upskilling that. Or
I think we would put some more support around it internally, maybe some external support in upskilling that, or maybe just more pointed placement from the candidates who have maybe got that prior experience or have done a course in it previously, or maybe had previous experience in it, into those solutions, so that they're not coming from a standing start.
Yeah, great. Any other lessons learned before we wrap up in terms of has it worked for us so far?
I mean, lessons learned for me would be that kind of, I think at the risk of sounding like we're blowing our own trumpet here,
Go on.
I think we've done a good job at it, and I think it's been good. I think it's been good for the company, and it's been received well. But I suppose I would put that one back to yourself, Thea, as a member of our kind of SLT. What do you think? How do you think it's being received? And what would your opinion and the wider SLT's opinion been on kind of the impact it's had here at Advania?
Yeah, so I think what we didn't kind of go into is what we did have success metrics right from the off, which were obviously very strongly linked to the cost model and whether we can make it financially make sense over the 2-year period. So that's still too early to tell, but we're not. We've become marginally under where we thought we might be. But like you said, right from the off, we haven't done this before, right? So we were kind of having to make some huge assumptions in terms of that ramp up, and every dependency is going to link to the pipeline, right? So it's never going to be perfect science. So I think from that perspective, it's definitely it's tracking as it should be, and the only dependency that hasn't been in its favour is that the pipeline hasn't quite matched up with what we'd kind of modelled out, which is a reflection of the marketplace. So if we zoom out from the actual just the cost model itself and look at the kind of the broader impact to the business and the broader success metrics, did we manage to kind of level up in terms of Manchester? Put more people up in our Manchester office and house those people up in Manchester? Absolutely. Did we manage to over-index in terms of our female hiring? Absolutely. Not as much as we'd have liked, and we'll go at it again next year, I'm sure, but absolutely. Did we manage to engage our leaders to kind of putting something back into society? We talk about we at Advania are hell-bent on driving a sustainable business, and that's not just internally, that's kind of externally, and helping our clients design drive their sustainable businesses. So if that's all part of it, right, bringing in early talent and bringing them into a career pathway that we know we can create amazing careers here, and I can guarantee that those 12 candidates probably never dreamed of having this opportunity, because didn't think that was within their line of sight at the time. So I think that's driven a massive part of our kind of CSR agenda, if you will, but also that impact to people's sense of belonging across the Manchester teams, but also in the wider business around just doing the right thing by society, and helping those into a career pathway that might not have been an obvious choice for them. So I think overall, as the cost model is stacking up, it's definitely starting to get some traction and filling some of those billable days. Obviously, the whole point of it was for professional services. There's been a fantastic buzz. The individuals themselves have been have made such a mark for themselves. Like they're doing such cool stuff. They're really, it's almost like they've got this branded identity that's given them this sense of, a real sense of confidence to put stuff out there, or to, put blogs out there, or to, get out there on our intranet and say something that is kind of quite brave in the size of our business we are now, but yet they've been instilled with this confidence because we have, put them in the headlights. So I think that's been super interesting. And because of that, I think we're all just smiling about it. I think the whole of the SLT is just super, super happy around the impact this has had. Not necessarily to our resourcing, solving our resourcing talent right now, 6 months in, but it's not about that, right? This is not a short-term fix. It's never will be when you're doing an early talent program. This is a long-term fix. But what's been absolutely delightful is the broader impact it's had to the business, and just this kind of sense of belonging and buzz that it's created. So no, I think if you asked any one of us, not least me and the CEO Jeff, etc., we're super, super happy, and Pat, of course, and I know he's Pat, who runs our professional services division, who's extremely proud of the program that's been built and how it's rolled out so far. So, and I think you should be too, Eden, because it's all on you.
Thanks. I am. It's incredibly proud. I will say, genuinely, it is a career highlight, and I think always will be.
That's fantastic. So what's next? So just as we wrap up, do you want to tell us what's next? Doing it again next year? Doing it elsewhere? Loaded question.
Yeah, loaded question. We are doing it in South Africa, Cape Town, our Cape Town office, from February. So kind of wheels are really in motion on that one now, working out how we do an assessment day, using our fantastic team in South Africa, with some of our heads of department being onshore here in the UK. And then, hopefully we'll see cohort 2 in 2025 UK intake, hopefully around September time. So yeah, lots of going on. I don't think this is the first and last time. Hopefully that, this will be a start of many years to come on the kind of Advania early years scheme.
Brilliant. So watch out for version 2.0. And thanks for listening. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Eden. Bye-bye.